Hello, everyone. This is Sergio Marrero, and we're here with another episode of RBL1 Live. We have our next investor, Katy, who is General Manager of Founder Fuel of Real Ventures. Thanks again for joining us today, Katy.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for having me, Sergio. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. Just to share a little bit about Katy, she is an operator and seasoned startup, founder, and has been in this innovation space for quite some time. And she's graduate from McGill University, also HEC Montreal, and currently she's general manager of Founder Fuel. I like to kick it off to share, if you could share a little bit with the audience about Real Ventures and Founder Fuel.
Sure. So Founder Fuel is an accelerator, tech accelerator in Canada. It's like the oldest one. It started in 2011, and it's got 13 cohorts strong. And so we're a venture-backed accelerator, and it's 4 months, and we run it about once or twice a year, depending on the year. So Real Ventures is Founder Fuel is wholly owned by Real Ventures. Real Ventures is a VC, early stage focused VC in Canada. We have 5 funds that are active, and they are 325 million under management. We're raising our 6th fund currently, and we're based in Montreal, and we've got a lot of portfolio companies that known in Canada and also internationally. So really happy to be part of the team there. I joined them about 20 months ago. So relatively new to venture, but spent a lot of time operating in startups and also in big corporations as well.
Excellent. And for the startups that that you support as a part of Founder Fuel, can you share a little bit more about the stage, industry of focus, size check that you all look to support?
Sure. So my role at Real is Founder Fuel General Manager, but also on the pre-seed investment fund as well. So we have a pre-seed and a seed investment. So I kind of like delineate those, I guess. So Founder Fuel, as I said, is a venture-backed startup, venture-backed accelerator with startups. Generally, we range. It's very typical, kind of like the tech stars. So for a certain amount, like 100 right now, it's like the last cohort was like $120,000 for each of the starters that we selected. We selected 8 of them, very much aligned with like the Techstars model as well. So part equity, part note / safe. For that, in the pre-seed fund for us, check sizes range. It's very pre-seed, so like low MR, and ideation, some of them, and anywhere range between 2 to 400. And then in the seed, it goes upwards into the millions for our seed fund as well. So those are like the separate entities that we have. We also have another entity called Front Row Ventures, which is really awesome. It's the equivalent of like a dorm room fund in the US. So across 22 campuses in Canada. And that's kind of funding student-led startups so for an initial check of $25,000. But if a lot of students don't know that maybe building a company is a way to do something, if they have a patent or they're working on something really cool in the lab, that's a way for them to get started as well. So, I think Real really covers the breadth of everything or early stage. And we have physical locations, Notman House, which is something really known in Montreal. It's kind of like the hub of startups. Like we were very active in building that, and also, at Mars, which is in Toronto. So that's kind of like the lay of the land, and the type of startups we look for in the industries you were mentioning. We're very all tech. So I would say that's kind of our focus. We're sector agnostic. We tend to like SaaS businesses more than hardware, for example, and there are certain partners, I spent 3 years in AI and, ran a business intelligence team before that in the casino business. And so I have an interest in like everything data ops and AI and anything of data structures there. Synthetic data, I just made an investment in a synthetic data company. And some other partners really like marketplaces. So Janet Bannister, who's the managing partner, she worked at eBay, founded Kijiji in Canada. That's kind of her background. So we have deep tech, marketplaces, quantum, you name it. There's probably everything that we invest in across the board.
That's great. And can you share a little bit on your insight of being being a Canada focus fund, what are some of the unique aspects of being a VC based in Montreal?
Sure. I like that, like the history, which was, I think the co-founders of Real, which is Alan McIntosh, J.S. Cournoyer, and also John Stokes, there's this whole like brain drain back in the early 2000s, and like all the amazing talent in Canada just had to go down to the US to get funded, to get all that kind of advancement for any startups, had to go to the Valley, or and I think that especially in Montreal and in Canada, this desire to like, no, let's keep it here, let's keep it growing. And I think since 2007, like this year alone, I mean, it's been so hot. I don't know if you've seen like some of the numbers, like our biggest year ever in venture and PE was, 2019. And we just beat that in the first half of the year in 2021. So the market's really on fire. So, sitting here, we actually are seeing tons of international, especially US, and I work with a couple of firms in Europe, like they want in on Canada because we've laid such a solid foundation on so much deep tech. So quantum, AI, be funding this through our universities, and our universities are really top notch on converting this into like commercial applications. So I would say right now it's very competitive. It's very competitive, and it's awesome to like see so many VCs coming from abroad. And as I mentioned earlier to you, like we partnered with Techstars in 2017 to bring Techstars into Canada. So the first 3 years, we Real Ventures and Techstars, put in place Techstars Toronto and also Techstars AI in Montreal, which is the only AI focused Techstars out of the 53 or so that cohorts or international cohorts they have. So it's exciting. Like I am definitely excited. The crops of startups and everyone staying local, and the job generation and the ecosystem and the economy that's just becoming this amazing machine and making Canada really stand up on the map. So I'm excited about that.
Amazing. And for those that don't know, what in your mind makes Montreal unique? And to mention AI, and I think not everybody knows that Montreal is a hub for
Sure.
AI. So if you could share a little bit on what do you think makes Montreal unique, and if you want to dive into like why AI in Montreal, like what's also going on there.
Yeah. So for those who are around AI, I think they probably heard that Montreal is quite the hub. We actually hosted NeurIPS, which is the biggest conference in AI a couple of years ago, and I think what brings so much amazing tech, like I think it's always that like, hey, what an overnight success. But if you dig down, like there's an organization called CFAR, so it's Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, and they've been funding university labs on long shot, moonshot bets for 30 some years. And they've been, way before AI had the computing power to do the things that they do. They were investing into the professors and the grad students and trying to lay those foundations at the University of Montreal, University of Toronto, like all the different universities, McGill, et cetera. And so now we're seeing the fruits of all that come to fruition, that commitment to funding the academic labs. So that's why I think now, and why AI specifically, and Toronto also, that we have a corridor, the Windsor Toronto corridor, and Montreal as well, is really where all the technology is spinning up. So, for those who knew BlackBerry, well, that was also, back in the day, like early beginning tech. We have Shopify, who, people know very well, and Lightspeed so Lightspeed's based in Montreal. And we're just seeing, especially AI in this city. In 2017, I was part of Element AI. So that was Canada's like largest AI firm for quite some time. We started, October 2019, and then, within 2 years, we grew to 550 people, a lot of verticals. We, had offices in Seoul, like South Korea. We got like Singapore, London, AI for Good arm over there, Montreal and Toronto. And that's because, I don't know if you know about the Turing Prize, but so the Turing Prize is the equivalent of like the kind of like the Nobel Prize of computer science. And recently, for example, they were acknowledged. So, Geoffrey Hinton, who was, head of Google AI and came back to University of Toronto. And then you have Yoshua Bengio, who created the Montreal Institute of Learning Algorithms, or MILA, which is based out of University of Montreal. He is hugely committed to Montreal, doesn't want the brain drain, and bringing companies to their knees, like opening labs in Montreal. So you literally in 2017 had like the biggest companies around the world. So Microsoft, Fair, like a Facebook AI, a Google AI, like opening offices. You had Samsung, like you name it, like all over Asia, all over the US, like everyone. DeepMind opened a lab here as well. So it really brought the world around MILA, like the Montreal Institute of Learning Algorithms, to concentrate that knowledge and learning. Because I think, Joshua, which I really appreciated him saying, is like, what, who's going to train those of the next generation? Like, it's got to be here, and it's got to be close to the university. And how do we collaborate with commerce and universities to do it together? So that's why AI, I think, is so big in this city. And, we're starting to see quantum starting to surface, like in Sherbrooke, in Quebec, and also in the corridor in Toronto as well, which is cool.
Amazing. And no, thank you for sharing that insight for folks, to make sure they make their way to Montreal. If we can hear a little bit more about Katy's story, how did you go from being more on the operator side to now being an investor? If you can take us through some of that journey of what inspired that.
That's a great question. If you had asked me 6 months before I joined Real Ventures that I was going to be in venture capital, I think I probably would have laughed in your face. It was not on this roadmap. I know it's amazing. I speak to some people who are just amazingly brilliant, and they had it, they knew since the university, they knew they wanted to go into VC, and this is really where they wanted to add value. I wouldn't say my story was that, so graduated McGill, and back in the day, it was a long time ago. So it's like 2001. And those like management programs were coming out where they identified a shortfall of talent that was going to happen. So I joined, Maple Leaf Foods. I ran white bread across Canada, manufacturing and logistics, brand, back in the day, brand and product management were almost the same thing. So you ran the P&L for that. So so I spent about almost 9 years or 8 years in managing bread production facilities, and what we call DSD, or direct store delivery, and consumer packaged goods. That's really where I got started. And then I transitioned. I had an opportunity to go work in casino gambling. My mentor at the time, anyways, this long story, but I won't get into that. So I went over and said, hey, what the ask was, like, we want to actually have that CPG product management mentality in casinos. So I went over to work in casino in Canada. All games are chance are run by the government. So I ended up working for the government for 8 years. And it was new product development, product management, so slots and tables. And I ran also the business intelligence team. So like fraud and all that kind of stuff. So data infrastructure, because slot and table games and online gaming are running all the time. There's loyalty programs. There's like big fish and whales, or whatever you want to call them. So getting to know all that side of it was really cool. And then I also run a nonprofit. I run TEDx Montreal, so TED Talks, since 2013. And that's where I met a lot of incredible, so the mission of TEDx Montreal is to elevate Montreal-born ideas onto the global stage. So our team is extraordinary and just has a pulse into all what's happening in education, in arts, in culture, we have a lot of research labs and healthcare labs. We have tons, McGill and the university health centers are incredibly renowned worldwide. So that's how I kind of met Joshua, who was one of the co-founders of Element AI, and he kind of facilitated that. So I went over there. And then when we raised our $200 million, the transition there, unfortunately, my father had a massive brainstem stroke during the week of our $200 million Series B. So it took me out of, I obviously closed back into my family, caring for my father. And at that time, a good friend of mine, Naomi Goldapple, was like, you know what, they have this job. They're looking for this general manager for Founder Fuel. I think you'd be really good at that. I'm like, Naomi, I can't right now. I'm just fully focused on my father and all that kind of stuff. And he has rehabilitation. So he has locked-in syndrome. So it's quite complex, kind of like what Stephen Hawking's had. But he has it through a stroke. So she said, meet with Sylvain Carl, who's a partner on the pre-seed fund, and I said, oh, okay, fine. And then that's how it happened. I just fell in love with Real. I fell in love with like I fell in love with all the people there, which is funny because they were an investor in Element AI, and my perception of VCs at the time wasn't exceptionally favorable. But having Janet and John and Alan and JS and the team and Isaac, et cetera, and like I interviewed them really hard about their values, their culture, how they see things. And we are ecosystem, like community. We're for community and we're for founders. And I just never met a VC firm that really believed that that we are here to help founders be the best that they can be. That I've heard a lot of it's all about the money. It's all about, and I think we believe that money will come, if we help the founders build the business and solve the problems they really want to build and solve for, we will also benefit from that. And I loved that approach, with the conscious leadership and just understanding the impact and influence that investors, that we have on them, and understanding that what founders impact, founders create a culture, either toxic or not. And it starts with these founders. And if we can have an outsized influence on that. So, that's my story coming into. So what's been really cool is I was always this weird, black sheep of CPG, then casino gambling, and then AI, and then running a nonprofit. And it was all really weird. And for the first time in this job, I feel very much at home and at ease and able to really serve the founders, because I've touched so many things. So, it's really an honor to be able to work in this space, and an honor to serve all the founders that I touch with, whether or not they're my portfolio company or not, whether it's in the ecosystem or not. I'm pretty much open to just support, which is cool.
That's an amazing story. I love it. And also bringing your, full scale, somebody saw you in the operator capacity and pulled you in, and like you're saying, I think the best VCs are skeptical of VC. They have a little bit of that challenge. But in that note, what do you think? What is the value of being an operator in the venture space? How do you think it has made you a better investor, and better supporter of startups?
That's a great question. So definitely in founder fuel. So, accelerators are pretty intense. It's a pretty intense place to be. You're talking go-to-market strategy. You're talking about product roadmaps. You're talking about fundraising, tap dancing for money. And what's interesting is there's very few companies that come my way that I don't have an understanding of one part or another of their business, or my networks, which are really quite vast, to help connect the dots for someone else, which is really neat. So that's really been very helpful as an operator, is hey, at Element, I did a lot of pipeline management. So, that, the B2B or the B2B2C or any kind of pipeline stuff. Well, when I look at their go-to-market strategy, I understand sales cycles and how long it takes to get into massive corps versus short, and how do you do a POC, and specifically on data management and AI, I don't code, but I manage a data science team for 3 years. So, and my boyfriend's a mathematician, data scientist, so we argue about stuff all the time. And so I really have a very good understanding, and coupling the product and the go-to-market timing on feature launches, and how to get that momentum to get the milestones to then fundraise. When's the right time to go out and raise? What do you need to accomplish to get that? And then also, I've ran really big teams for a long time. So, all the people management side, how do we find those right key players up front? And when do you, it's I know we want to hire fast sometimes, but what are the fundamental things and the triggers to fire someone, because they're going to derail your team very quickly, or the culture that you're trying to build. When you're three, the culture of one person, it pollutes very quickly, or it uplifts very quickly. So I think the breadth I have is just being able to really come across not just the branding or the fundraising or the product. I'm pretty much in a capacity to support across many aspects of what it takes to build a business.
Excellent. So no, thank you for sharing more of your story in that regard. And what would you what's next for Founder Fuel?
Yeah, I think so. Founder Fuel, I'm really happy to say that, like, you know, of the 8 companies we had last year, like 6 of them already closed rounds, like, which is very, just like how hot that is. Like, usually when I talk to people of accelerators, they're like, oh, we have 1 or 2, you know, that maybe raised in the first 2 years. Like, we've got 6 out of 8 that are raised, you know, which is a pretty hot batting average. I'm pretty sure all 8 are going to come through. So what's next is our next cohort, which is next year. So we took a break on 2021. We did an all virtual cohort given COVID last year. And I think there's some sort of magic of like gathering people. Like, I think we're all a little bit tired of everything virtual. So it's like, okay, let's do a little break. Let's get everyone back, because we usually have everyone physically, and let's do a real demo day in person, you know, like, you know, these virtual demo days, like all the pitches kind of like, like I think we're a little bit like, okay, been there, done that. And our demo day was awesome last year in the way that, like, we did a hybrid. So I actually brought everyone in. They did it on stage live to a live broadcast audience. So there was the sweat, you could see people sweating, not just like, you know, pre-canned, you know,
absolutely.
play the video. Like, they actually got on stage live and pitched their business. And that was pretty cool. So
awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Katy, for joining us, and for everyone tuning in. This was Rebel One Live, and please join us next week for more amazing VCs and CEOs like Katy. So thanks again for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Sergio. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can reach out on LinkedIn. More